The option that I want is to be able to eat an abundance, a lot of healthy food, eat normally, and still maintain a healthy weight. And the only way you can do that is by ensuring that your metabolism is burning hot and is really making sure you're burning a lot of calories at rest. So that's why we have to focus, in my opinion, first on metabolic repair instead of slashing calories super low.
You're listening to the Plant-Based Diet Podcast, where we talk about all things plant-based. I'm Esther Garfin, the host of this show and founder of Alternative Food Network. Join me and my amazing array of guests who are a mix of healthcare professionals, industry executives, and people with an interesting story to tell about their plant-based journey. Let us help you with your journey, wherever you're at, to learn the what, why, and how to eat plant-based. Welcome to the first plant-based diet episode of 2024. And what better way to start than with the guest from one of our most popular episodes last year, Hannah Van Ark, aka the Plant Forward Nutritionist. Hannah is a registered dietitian dedicated to helping people thrive by eating more plants. And in today's episode, she's going to let us in on 4 common mistakes that she sees when people are trying to lose weight on a plant-based diet and how to avoid these mistakes. Because it's not automatic that the weight just comes off because you're eating more plants. But first, I wanted to let you know about a pivot we've made to our Doctors Plus series. It's now called Culinary Medicine Recipe, and it includes both English and Spanish episodes. Culinary medicine is a new evidence-based field of medicine that blends the art of food and cooking with the science of medicine to prevent and treat disease. You might have heard about food as medicine, medically tailored meals, produce prescriptions. Well, the host of this show, Dr. Sabrina Falke, is a triple board certified physician and leading culinary medicine expert. We'll be getting to all of this and more with an expanded guest list that includes top chefs, doctors, healthcare visionaries, and food service professionals. In addition to interview episodes, you'll also get practical mini episodes in English and Spanish, whichever you choose, on how to care for your health with nutritious and enjoyable food. You can stream this show on the alternativefoodnetwork.com website or listen to it on your favorite podcast listening platform where you can follow Culinary Medicine Recipe. As for this show, Plant-Based Diet, I'd like to thank presenting sponsor Prolon. Prolon is precision nutrition technology clinically proven to keep you in a fasting state while nourishing your body with food. I personally like to achieve a fasting window of 15-16 hours simply for wellness reasons from when I eat dinner until mid-morning the next day, and Prolon's products help me do this. If you'd like to try Prolon, they're offering the Plant-Based Diet listeners a 15% discount using promo code AFN15. Just click the link in the episode description and type in code AFN15 to get 15% off your order. If you use the link, we may receive a small commission from your purchase. And now to today's guest, Hannah Van Ark. Welcome to the show, Hannah. It's so great to see you again.
Hi, Esther. It's so good to be back. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, it's been a bit since we saw you last. Last time you were pregnant. And
I was.
Since then you have had a beautiful baby girl.
That's right. Yeah, it's been great. She's a very fun, easy baby for the most part, and we've just loved the transition of becoming parents, and it throws a wrench in things, as any new parents will know. The sleep was tough for a while there. As a dietitian, I've had to sort of rework some of my own, nutrition habits to be a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, with less time on my hands, things like that. But overall, we've just loved it, and it's been such a fun experience for us, for sure.
I remember last time we spoke, you talked about batch cooking or preparing. Are you still able to do that with a baby?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I do a lot of meal planning still, and the way that we currently batch cook is we just make 2 or so really big dinners per week, and then we use those leftovers for lunch. before baby, I was making a lot of freezer meals. And so what I was doing is making big batches of things like lasagna or enchiladas or chilies. And I would freeze portions of those so that while we were newly postpartum and obviously not able to cook too much, we would just defrost those. And we went through some of those, but we still have some in the deep freeze. So I pulled out a lasagna like last week that I'd made before the baby, and it still tasted great. But freezer meals are really easy. But there's a lot of ways to batch cook. So right now, what we're doing more is just cooking in the evening, using it for leftovers. But if we have extra portions, we'll freeze them.
Well, you look great. I mean, for people listening to this on audio only, you can't see Hannah. Although if you go into our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see her a little bit. We put some clips of our podcast on our YouTube channel. But we're recording, and I can see Hannah's face. I can't see anything else, but I can see your face. Yeah. You look great. You don't look tired, that's for sure.
Oh, that's good to hear. Some days are better than others.
Listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. And as I said in my intro, your episode last year had the most downloads. So I thought, it would be great to have you back.
That's so honoring. I love that resonated with people. So yes, thank you for having me back. I'm always happy to chat with your listeners.
Well, thank you. And today we are going to focus on weight loss.
Yep.
Maybe you'll throw in a few things about postpartum weight loss, but really the episode is about weight loss. And, I guess one might assume that if you're going to eat a plant-based diet or more plants, that the weight just falls off. But you told me that is not the case. So we're going to talk about why, and you're going to talk about some mistakes to avoid. So maybe we'll start with the why. Why isn't it as simple as, I'm going to eat more plants, I'm going to lose weight?
Yeah, I think that, plant-based diets do help with weight loss in a lot of cases. There's plenty of stories out there of people switching to vegan overnight and losing 100 pounds, and it's easy as that. I would argue there's probably a lot behind the scenes that they were doing right that wasn't all 100% dependent upon the fact that they were just eating plants, because you can eat a plant-based diet and still not lose a pound. I see it all the time in my clients. I'm a specialist from my former podcast episode, that I was a farmer longevity researcher, and my sort of introduction to Plant Forward Nutrition was through that lens. But since then, I've focused on sustainable weight loss. And so that is my area of expertise right now. That's what I help my clients with, is sustainable weight loss through a plant forward lens. And a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I switched to vegan, it's been 6 months and I've gained weight, or I've switched to vegan and I don't know, why, but doesn't seem to be working. I'm not losing any weight. And I think that there's a couple of mistakes that people make when they transition to a plant-based diet that they don't think about ahead of time, but you come to realize as you're through it. There's the big four, as I like to say. And so there's 4 of them that I see again and again and again. But it really isn't as simple as just eating more plants in a lot of cases.
All right. And maybe before we get into those big 4, I just wanted to point out, so on this show, obviously it's called the plant-based diet. But for me, plant-based is not synonymous with vegan. Right? Plant-based is a majority, some sort of majority is plant-based in the diet. So when you're talking about this, are you talking about vegan or plant-based?
I'm talking about plant-based. So, and I think I agree that the plant-based is kind of synonymous with vegan in a lot of circles, and you might hear plant-based and think you have to be 100% vegan or something like that, but that's just not the case. I think plant-based is anywhere from 80 to 90% plants or more. I think that there's really good evidence for 90% plants or more being really good for long-term health, et cetera. That's what I try to do with myself and my clients. I'm not vegan or vegetarian. I actually do incorporate meat, fish, dairy, eggs, all of the things into my diet, but in very limited quantities to make sure that the majority of my food is coming from plants for the health benefits and other benefits too. So when I'm talking about a plant-based diet for weight loss, I'm talking about predominantly plants, but not necessarily vegan or vegetarian. That being said, this does apply to people who are vegan or vegetarian as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. I think it's important for people to understand what we mean when we say plant-based. So, all right. Hit me with the first mistake that people make.
Yeah. So I think the first mistake that I see people make when they're going plant-based is assuming that any and all plant-based foods are going to result in weight loss. Because there's a lot of plant-based foods out there, but they're not necessarily all health foods is what I would say at this point. There's two categories of foods where I feel like we need to watch our portion sizes or our frequencies of eating these foods a little bit more, even though they are plant-based. And the first and most obvious one is probably plant-based ultra-processed foods. So ultra-processed foods are going to be foods that have a lot of, refined carbohydrates, are processed and packaged in factories and kind of like that kind of processed food. Oreos would be an example. They're vegan, but they're not necessarily a health food, right? And some people also might call this like vegan junk food. I don't tend to love the term junk food. I think it kind of like moralizes it a little bit more than it needs to be, because food is food. There's just foods that we want to eat more often, and then there's foods that we want to eat less often if our goals are weight loss or our goals are long-term health, etc. So these hyper-processed or ultra-processed foods are vegan, they may be plant-based, but they're not going to be healthy for weight loss or for long-term health when eaten in these really large quantities. They're very calorie dense oftentimes, and so you're going to get a lot of calories, which we want to limit to some extent when we're trying to lose weight. They also tend to have a lot of sugar or refined carbohydrates, which can spike blood sugar. And as I'll get to in future points as we discuss this today, keeping blood sugar more stable and avoiding blood sugar spikes is critical for weight loss, more critical than people realize. And so when you're eating these hyper-processed foods, you're spiking blood sugar, you're getting probably extra calories. And I just don't want people to walk away with the assumption that just because it's vegan, it's healthy. It's not necessarily the case.
Right. I agree completely.
Yeah. So that's one of the foods that I would say, be careful of the portions and frequency with which you're eating those foods. The second category of food are completely healthy foods. You should be eating them, but they are also energy dense or calorie dense. And so these would be things like oils, avocado oil, olive oil, sesame oil, all these plant-based oils. They're healthy for you. I encourage you to incorporate oils into your lifestyle, but they are very calorie dense. And so when we're looking for weight loss, we may want to be mindful of the portion that we're using of certain foods like that. Another example might be nuts and seeds. They're extremely healthy. I want people eating nuts and seeds every day. They're associated with longevity, but they're extremely calorie dense. So in the context of weight loss particularly, we want to be sure that we're mindful of the portion of that too. You're going to find it difficult to lose weight if you're eating a pound or two of nuts every day, because even though they're a healthy food and they have healthy fats in them, they are going to have too many calories for what your body needs during the weight loss process. So I would say that just because it's vegan or plant-based doesn't mean it's necessarily going to help with weight loss. And there are situations where we have to be mindful of portion sizes and kind of the frequency with which we eat those foods.
So since you mentioned nuts as an example, I heard that, and I have no clue if this is correct or not, or if you would agree, but sure. I heard you shouldn't really have more than 10 nuts a day.
Yeah, I would say it sort of depends on the rest of your day. And this is the thing with nutrition. It's so annoying. We always say, well, it depends. I'd say 10 nuts a day is fine. I'd say it's almost a little low. I would say a portion of nuts is about an ounce. So if you think about having a portion of fat with every meal, which I really encourage people to do, an ounce of nuts is about a portion of fat. And so you can have an ounce of nuts with every meal if that's all the fat you're eating for that meal, right? So it's not necessarily about limiting to a certain number per day. It's what purpose does that food serve? And how do I build my plate in a balanced way and incorporate that if that's what I want? And so in my opinion, you want to have a balanced plate of fiber-rich vegetables, macronutrients like proteins and carbohydrates and fat. And so if nuts are a heavy fat food, but you want to eat them, just make sure you're balancing it with the rest of the things. So I hope that makes sense. It's less about an overall restriction of a number per day and a little bit more about what's the purpose it's serving, and do you balance that into your day once, twice, however many times you want, but it does have to be balanced.
Right. Well, for me, when I have some nuts, and I am allergic to some nuts, but other nuts I can eat, so I'm very happy that I can eat some. I wouldn't say they're part of a meal. They're a snack for me. Right, they're that 4 o'clock, ooh, I'm hungry, ooh, I feel like some junk, but I'm going to try to be good.
Yeah, you're going to eat those nuts instead, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a great snack because the thing about nuts is they're They have a lot of fat. They also have fiber, and they also have protein. And so protein and fat are the two macronutrients that make you feel fullest for longest. They're the most satiating macronutrients. And so when you combine those things with a snack, it's really a great option. So oftentimes people will do like dried fruit and nuts together, and that's like a perfect snack because you've got some carbohydrates, fiber-rich carbohydrates for the energy, and you have the protein and the fat in the nuts that are going to cause you to feel fuller for longer and balance that blood sugar spike. I'll talk a little bit more about blood sugar in the context of weight loss, but essentially eating carbohydrates like dried fruit on their own, that might cause a blood sugar spike. Carbohydrates tend to enter the blood more quickly as sugar, and what we want to do to avoid that spike is to pair it with fat and protein, nuts. So you can actually pair that, a carbohydrate-rich food with fat and protein like from nuts, and instead of having a blood sugar spike, which can create a hormonal profile that makes weight loss harder or makes fat storage easier, you can create a gentle blood sugar rise, which is what we want to see instead, and that is what is necessary for weight loss. So yeah, nuts on their own is fine.
Unsalted?
Unsalted is okay, absolutely. Salted is fine too, as long as you don't have any issue with high blood pressure or your doctor has recommended that you eliminate salt for any reason. I don't typically recommend eliminating salt unless there's like a reason to. Don't go crazy on it, but you don't have to like avoid it like the plague or anything. So salted, unsalted, depending on your health status. But yes, that's an excellent snack. But I do recommend if you're going to eat something like carb-rich by itself, pair it with something with protein and fat, like nuts.
Okay. All right. So that's number one.
That's number one. The other mistake, and this is the most common mistake I see. So that's common, but this is the most common mistake I see. And that is drastically slashing calories instead of focusing on repairing metabolism instead. Okay. So I think when we want to lose weight, we think about the calories in, calories out equation, right? It's so simple. It's just calories in versus calories out. You need to eat a little bit less than you expend in energy is kind of the idea. But people focus way too much on the eating part and way too little on the calorie expenditure part, in my opinion. So we think we have to eat as little as possible to lose weight as quickly as possible. We really slash calories. We eat these 1,200 calorie diets. And in doing so, we actually damage our metabolism instead of first thinking about how do we repair our metabolism to increase our calories out on a daily basis. So when we repair our metabolism, essentially what we're doing is we're causing our body to burn more calories at rest, just with living. And so when we're only focusing on the calories inside of the equation and slashing that down, and we're not focusing on actually training our bodies to burn more calories throughout the day, we're kind of fighting a losing battle because slashing calories tells our metabolism one thing, and that is we better cool it down and stop expending so much energy or we're not going to survive. Okay, so when you slash calories drastically, and I'm not talking about like a little calorie deficit, that is necessary for weight loss. That's fine. And in fact, we should be doing that. There's ways to do that. But when we really slash them down, that sends the body into a very stressed state. And it doesn't want to rev up your metabolism. It doesn't want to increase the number of calories you're burning at rest because the signal it's being sent is that we don't have enough food in the environment. Why would we do that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a problem. And you can lose weight on a very low calorie diet, but you have to stay on a very low calorie diet for your entire life or the weight will come back and your metabolism will be extremely slow. So that's one choice. Not a lot of people want that option. My clients and myself, the option that I want is to be able to eat an abundance, a lot of healthy food, eat normally, and still maintain a healthy weight. And the only way you can do that is by ensuring that your metabolism is burning hot and is really making sure you're burning a lot of calories at rest. So that's why we have to focus, in my opinion, first on metabolic repair instead of slashing calories super low. Does that make sense the way I'm explaining it?
Yeah.
Okay. And so in order to repair our metabolism and focus on how do I increase those calories out, there's a couple ways that we can do this. So I'm going to give you 2 ways that I've helped with my clients and that have helped me to focus on repairing metabolism first. And that is balancing blood sugar. I mentioned this a few times already, But when we balance our blood sugar and when we make sure that we're avoiding the blood sugar spikes that can come with eating refined carbohydrates completely by themselves, simple sugars, things like that, those all cause the spike. If we can avoid that, we create a hormonal environment in our bodies that makes it less likely that we'll store excess energy as fat. It makes it easier to lose weight. So there's a lot of science behind it. I'm not going to dig too deep into it right now, but balancing blood sugar and avoiding blood sugar spikes makes a hormonal environment, which makes it easier to lose weight. So that's the first thing, and that helps to repair our metabolism in the process. And then the other tip that I have for people is strength training. So strength training isn't nutrition related, but it is lifestyle related, and it is critical for weight loss, in my opinion. So I think that when we think about exercise and weight loss, we're like, what's going to burn the most calories in the moment? Probably cardio, right?
Yeah.
Running, elliptical, hours at the gym of cardio. And yes, that will burn the most calories in the moment, but it won't increase your metabolism long term in the way that strength training will. Because strength training builds muscle in your body. And muscle is our most metabolically active organ. It burns a ton of calories at rest, and it burns them all day long, which is way more than you could do at a session with cardio in the gym. So the more muscle you're able to maintain on your body as you are going through the weight loss process, the more calories you'll be able to burn at rest. And that helps to repair metabolism and really crank out the number of calories you're burning every day. So that's a really critical piece too.
Interesting. I'm not really sure I thought of it that way before, because you're right. You would automatically think about cardio.
Yes. And cardio can help. And there's a million great reasons to do cardio. It can help with weight loss to some extent, less so than strength training in my professional opinion. And I've seen it a lot of times. People stop doing cardio, start doing strength training, start dropping pounds. Happens all the time.
Wow.
All the time. But it still can help. And people love it. It's a great way to get outside. It reduces anxiety. It improves cardiovascular health. It improves longevity. There's a million great reasons to do cardio.
Yeah.
Weight loss isn't the best reason to do cardio, in my opinion. So don't stop cardio, but definitely if you're not incorporating strength training and your goal is body fat loss, it's a huge thing that helps.
And this is really a personal question of mine, because I do yoga as one of the things that I do, which, you're carrying your own body weight in a lot of poses. So would that fall into strength training?
Yes, I think it would fall more into the strength training than cardio side. Another thing that strength training in things like yoga would be better about with the weight loss equation is that they don't trigger the body to feel like it needs to hoard calories, because it's not this massive energy expenditure all at once. So with cardio, sometimes we see what we call compensatory mechanisms with the body. And so if you do a big bout of cardio, you're going to get starving. That's the body saying, I need more calories. Or in some cases, the body actually decreases your metabolism throughout the rest of that day after cardio, because it says, we spended way too much energy. We got to really hold it back. Strength training and yoga and more gentle movement that don't create such a wild calorie expenditure, they don't tend to trigger those mechanisms, which can, in the long run, help with weight loss. And yes, I think yoga is amazing because it creates strength. It does create with holding those poses and, using your body weight. It is a form of strength training. It's not heavy lifting, but in my opinion, it is a form of strength training.
Based on what you just said, even heavy lifting is not necessary, right? It could be light weight lifting.
It could
just
be
something to build
just
muscle.
Dumbbells and kettlebells and sort of things. You don't need to be an Olympic weightlifter or anything like that. You don't need to go that far. You can, but if you want to lose fat, you need to build muscle. That is very, very critical. And if you want to lose fat for a long time, you need to maintain your muscle, which is kind of what brings me to point number 3, or mistake that I see number 3. The third mistake that I typically see is undershooting protein when you're trying to lose weight. And if you recall, if any listeners listened to my previous episode with you guys, we talked about protein and how high protein diets are not associated with good longevity. They detract from longevity. We want to be focusing for longevity on low to moderate protein diets, and this is still true. That being said, during the weight loss process, I would encourage people to focus a little more on that moderate side than the low side, because getting enough protein during weight loss is important. We don't need to be pounding protein. We don't need to be doing like a gram of protein per pound of body weight or some of the things you see online. But we do need to get adequate protein because we need to be able to maintain our muscle as we're losing weight. Because as we lose weight, we can lose multiple types of weight. We can lose fat, which is what we ideally would want to lose, or we could lose muscle. It's both weight, but we want to keep our muscle because our muscle helps to stoke our metabolism long term. It helps us to be able to eventually eat a lot more while still maintaining a healthy weight. We want to keep our muscle. And the way we can keep our muscle is twofold. Use it or lose it, strength training. And you need to be eating enough protein to maintain that muscle. And so we got to get adequate protein. I don't recommend super, super high protein diets because, again, that contradicts the longevity. And in my practice, I don't jeopardize people's long-term health for that short-term goal. I don't believe in that. And so I think that moderate protein is more than enough, but we do want to be focusing on getting a protein source at every meal. It helps us to stay fuller for longer. It increases satiety, like I mentioned earlier. And then that does help to retain the muscle during the weight loss process. And it also helps to balance blood sugar when paired with a carbohydrate, right? And we talked about that hormonal environment being really important for weight loss too. So protein is important.
And what are some of your favorite plant-based proteins?
Yeah, plant-based proteins, there's plenty of them. And there's actually a lot of protein found in kind of like less typical protein foods too in plants. But my favorites are tofu, tempeh, and seitan. These sort of protein-dense plant proteins are really awesome to use all the time. There's also quite a bit of protein in beans, obviously, and so black beans, pinto beans, garbanzo beans, etc. Even some whole grains and seeds have a lot of protein, things like quinoa, barley. All these have like actually quite a bit of protein, and then nuts and seeds as well contain protein, especially things like hemp seeds. Hemp seeds, I think, is 10 grams of protein for a 3 tablespoon serving. So it's like very, very protein dense for a seed.
And one of my favorites, lentils.
Lentils, I know.
Yes.
I think we talked about lentils last time because
I
they
always
are
talk
so
about lentils.
good. I know, but they are so good. And lentils are a legume. They're a type of bean. They're high in protein. They're high in fiber. And they're, just this great, inexpensive protein source. So that's another really good one. And, when we're talking about protein, you can easily get adequate protein for weight loss and for muscle maintenance on a plant-based diet. There's no question about it. So you don't need to be incorporating animal products if you don't want to. If that being said, you are a vegetarian or you are an omnivore and you do incorporate some limited amounts of animal products, animal proteins tend to be more protein dense than plant-based foods. That's just fact. They do tend to be more protein dense. So targeted supplementation with some animal products every once in a while to make sure you're getting adequate protein can be a strategy for people who do want to incorporate both. But I want to emphasize that that's just not necessary. You're going to get plenty of protein on an exclusively plant-based diet if that's what you choose to do.
And since you did mention animal proteins, again, someone is having a plant-based diet but has the occasional meat or chicken. Is there a better option?
Yes, there is. Glad you asked. Yeah. We want to, when we're talking about like a healthier animal-based protein, fish is by far and away the healthiest, in my opinion, as far as the fat profile and the type of protein and all that stuff. So fish is good to incorporate if you are going to use animal products. I think fish is the best option probably. You can also incorporate things like low-fat dairy, low fat because we want to limit saturated fat to reduce our risk of heart disease. You could do eggs or egg whites, or you could do lean cuts of white meat like chicken, things like that. I don't recommend eating too much red meat. If you do eat red meat, limiting it to once a week is probably my recommendation. And that's just because it comes with saturated fat, and there is a concern that it can increase the risk of certain cancers too.
All right. And now number 4.
Right.
Mistake
number 4. Yeah. So number 4, I would say, is being too strict. And I think this is counterintuitive for some people because when we get gung-ho on weight loss and we really want to lose weight and do it for good, we think we need to overhaul everything in our life, and we think we need to do this and that and do it perfectly and just tough it out and just suck it up and all of this stuff. And we want to do well, right? But when we're really, really strict and not allowing any flexibility in our lifestyle, we tend to adopt this all or nothing mentality. And if you feel that you can only be successful if you're perfect, you will never be successful because you will never be perfect. There is no way to do everything so perfectly that you're never going to feel like, oh, I slipped up there. And so the question is, when you slip up, does it become this cycle of, oh, I slipped up on Friday night. Well, I guess the whole weekend is blown. I guess I'll start again Monday. Or does it become that so many times and now it's November that you're like, well, the holidays are right around the corner. Since I can't be perfect, I guess I'll just start in January, right? And that cycle happens so much that I think it's so damaging to not have a plan of resiliency for when things don't go perfectly according to plan. And one of the ways that we can create that resiliency is just creating more flexibility in the plan to begin with, understanding that if there's foods that you love, there is always a way to incorporate foods that you love into a weight loss plan. There is always a way to do that. And so I think it's really important to understand that you don't have to give up every food that you love. You can absolutely incorporate those into your plan and still see success. And not having that all or nothing mentality can protect you later on from giving up, which is what I see happen most often is people don't feel like they did it well enough, and so they just can't do it at all. And I want to challenge that. I want to say we can definitely, and animal products are another good example of it. Say somebody wants to eat plant-based for weight loss, but they can't seem to just be 100% vegan. Typically what I see in that situation is people just giving up and throwing it out entirely and saying it doesn't work for me. Well, no. What about 90% plant-based? Like, could that work for you? Could incorporating that amount of flexibility work a little bit better for you? So I would say being too strict and then giving up because of it is a big barrier. And the solution to that is just to incorporate more balance and flexibility into your lifestyle and to find the way that works for you.
Great words of advice. And as we wind down this episode, I did want to ask you if there are any listeners who are pregnant or who might have just had a baby, since you yourself have just gone through that.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular words of wisdom based on your own personal experience in the last half a year?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was always interesting for me going through this experience, having been a mentor for many women who are trying to lose weight after baby. That's a lot of my clients. And I was like, how is this experience going to make me feel? Because there's a lot of pressure on women, I feel like, to bounce back, to get back to their pre-baby weight. And then especially me being in the position as I am as a public-facing, Plant Forward weight loss dietitian, I was like, I felt a little bit of that extra pressure, but luckily through the work that I've done with clients and through myself, I understand that it's really not about getting somewhere as quickly as possible. And I didn't, I took my sweet time to be able to make sure that I was nourishing my body well. My number one priority was breastfeeding during that time. I'm still breastfeeding my daughter, and I didn't want to jeopardize my milk supply for the sake of losing the baby weight quickly. So I took my time in terms of the weight loss, and I think about it as finding my body's best weight. And I tell my clients this all the time: your body's best weight evolves throughout your lifespan and in your lifetime, and it's not always the exact same. So when people say return to pre-baby weight, that may not be a reality for absolutely everybody, and that's actually completely okay. What we want to do is lead with our habits and with the process of the habits. And if you're leading with the habits that make you feel your best, that allow you to achieve a healthy weight in order to reduce chronic disease risk, and that you can feel confident in terms of your body, you like the way you look, that's important too. And then also feeling strong and feeling recovered. All of that is more important than the exact number on the scale. So I have to say, I have zero attachment to my pre-pregnancy number. Being honest, I'm a few pounds up or, around that, and it's doesn't bother me.
You're nursing. It's okay.
Well, and it's actually okay. Even if I was done nursing, it'd be okay too. If my weight settles at somewhere where it is not the exact number on the scale, that's okay with me, because I know that my habits and focusing on the process are going to carry me to that ideal weight no matter how long it takes. Yeah. And so it's totally fine with me if it doesn't settle at the exact same place. I also have some more muscles on my body from carrying this baby around. She's like 18 pounds now. So just picture carrying around an 18-pound kettlebell everywhere you go. And, so there's a million reasons why your weight might change and why your previous weight might not be your ideal weight now. And so for anybody who's postpartum, I would just encourage you to be patient, to take your time, to focus on the process and the habits and the journey rather than the outcome. And if weighing is not triggering for me. I don't have attachments to the number on the scale in the same way where it would make me feel bad about myself if I saw a certain number. But
I don't own a scale.
That's
in my adult life. Yeah. I have never owned a scale.
So you don't really care about it either. Yeah, nope. And I do own a scale. I do it for data. I'm interested in seeing the progress. But I don't have an emotional attachment to that number that I see. If you do have an emotional attachment to that number that you see, I would say don't weigh. You don't need to weigh. Just focus on the habits and focus on how your body is feeling, how your clothes are fitting, things like that. And then if your clothes don't quite fit, postpartum moms, buy new clothes. That's okay. You want to feel comfortable, So I would say take the pressure off, but don't think that just because you take the pressure off, it's not important to still feel good in your body. There are ways to do that through the process of losing body fat as your journey continues, but I wouldn't rush it, and I certainly wouldn't worry too much about bouncing back as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Great advice. All right. Well, now if someone wants to find you, where should they look? Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. That's where people mostly find me. So I'm at plant.forward.nutritionist on Instagram. I'm also now on YouTube. I started that over the summer. So I have a YouTube channel where I do a lot more long-form videos, meal prep videos, what I eat in a week videos, things like that. And that can be helpful for people who are interested in a plant-forward lifestyle but don't know how to put it all together, So I hope if you're a YouTube user, you come visit me over there. And then I also have a resource. I've developed a course that helps you walk through my method for weight loss. It's called the Plant Forward Plan. So if anything that I've been saying today resonates with you and you're like, okay, this is kind of the approach that I want to take, that's what I teach in the Plant Forward Plan. And it's essentially a course that helps you to focus more on nourishment to simplify weight loss through eating more whole plant foods instead of all of the restriction and tracking and counting that you might find in other programs. So I just teach you essentially how to visually build your plate so you're not counting and tracking, you're using visual cues, and then strategies to repair your metabolism as well to create this environment, hormonal environment and physical environment where weight loss becomes more simplified. So if that's something that you're interested in, that will be available in January of this year. And that's a great way to get started with plant forward weight loss that's less restrictive and just more sustainable and long term. And how would people find that? Would just on your Instagram or do you have a website?
I have a website. It's theplantforwardnutritionist.com. And there's a button that says course. You just click that and you can find the course there. You can find it in the link in my bio on Instagram as well. There will be a link to the course there.
Wonderful. Yeah. All right. Well, it was so great to see you again. I love having you on the show.
Yeah, anytime, please. I would love to come back another day. But thanks for having me, and it was great to chat with you again.
You too. And again, congratulations on motherhood.
Thank you. It's been quite the wild ride, but I'm sure we'll catch up about it next time too.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Esther.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope you found this informative. I'd really appreciate if you could rate the show or leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. If you're on social media, please follow us at Alternative Food Network on Facebook and Instagram. And we also publish a monthly newsletter that includes plant-based recipes, videos, and our latest podcasts. You can subscribe by going to our website at alternativefoodnetwork.com and click the subscribe button. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Prolon. Until next time, thanks for listening. All content provided or opinions expressed in this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice. Please seek advice from your doctor or other qualified healthcare practitioner.